I do have a Christmas tree behind me. We are recording this podcast in December, but if you are sitting in January with your tree still out, don't feel bad. Let's just pretend it's January and my tree is still out.
Intrinsic motivation is when you, in and of yourself, are motivated internally for doing this because you love it, because you want to do it. Would you agree with that, Heather?
I think that's an absolute perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself, Angela. If you're intrinsically motivated, you're more likely to stay the course on your learning. Because, and it makes sense when you think about it, because the motivation is coming from you from within, and you don't have to keep on finding that motivation from those external factors.
I like to replace it with, I get to do this, I get to do that. So that it's not seen as a chore or as work, even if it's something I want to do. As soon as I make it I should do this because I want to be better at the harp, it becomes a chore rather than a joy of learning the instruments and what I originally, was drawn to.
Welcome to the How to Harp podcast, where your harp and your journey are always front and centre. I'm Heather Downey, harpist and founder of How to Harp, your online space for expert guidance and endless inspiration. Each week, we are here to empower, inspire and encourage you, whether you're just beginning or many years into your harp adventure. From chats with world-class professionals to real stories from everyday harpists, to practical tips you can use right away. This podcast is all about helping you feel happy, confident and fulfilled with your harp. This is episode 23 and it's time for another Harpy Tutor Chat with Angela. In today's episode, we are talking about intrinsic motivation, what it actually means and why it can make such a difference to your consistency and progress as a harp learner. Now, this conversation was inspired by our recent guest speaker, Dr. Eric Booth, and we dive into topics like taking should out of your vocabulary, tapping into curiosity and flow, and how mindset can shape what you believe is possible for you. Hello, Angela. So good to see you again, although not in person.
Hi, Heather. Lovely to see you again. Yes, not in person this time, but still wonderful to be together.
Absolutely. Sometime soon in the future, in person, I'm sure.
Yeah, lots of big things to look forward to this year.
I know, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And you're very clever because you've just said this year, and my brain immediately went, right now it's not this year. Right now it's December, but when this podcast goes out, it will be January 2026. And so for those of you who are watching on visuals right now, I will just say right now that I do have a Christmas tree behind me. We are recording this podcast in December, but if you are sitting in January with your tree still out, don't feel bad. Let's just pretend it's January and my tree is still out.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Absolutely. So we are going to be discussing today intrinsic motivation, which it sounds a little bit like, I don't know, sciencey, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds a bit cognitive.
And it kind of is, because the reason that Angela and I have decided to get together and talk about intrinsic motivation is because we have just had amazing guest speaker, Dr. Eric Booth presenting in the How to Harp membership. And if you haven't listened to the podcast with him yet, I'd recommend scrolling back up through our podcast list and having a listen, because he is one amazing character. Right, Angela?
Yeah, I've been looking forward to you speaking to him for a few months now, and it was an amazing podcast, and then he also presented in the membership as well, and it's got both of us, I think, thinking deeply, and so we wanted to hop on and discuss that a little bit and share that with our listeners.
Absolutely. And so I think it's important to actually start by saying the reason we got Eric Booth on, who usually teaches teachers, he's known for promoting the phrase the teaching artist, and he usually works with other teachers, but we felt really passionate about the fact that all learners are teachers. Even if you're learning with a one-to-one tutor, particularly if you're learning online and you're quite, you've got quite a lot of autonomy over your own learning, you are your own teacher because you're choosing your own path. But even if you're working with a one-to-one tutor, you see that tutor once a week, maybe if you're lucky, maybe once every 2 weeks, and all that other time, you are your tutor, right? So we felt it was important to have him come in and talk to us a little bit about how we can be our own tutors and support our own learning. And Eric, off his own back, then decided to talk about intrinsic motivation. And so I'm going to ask Angela, can you explain what intrinsic motivation is?
Oh, putting me on the spot, but sure. Intrinsic motivation is when you are motivated or wanting to do something basically for the sake of doing it, for that process, for doing it, rather than just for some sort of external motivation. It's probably easier to understand by understanding what extrinsic motivation is, which is where you have some sort of reward or doing it for someone else because you want to get some sort of pay or some sort of payback or some kind of results. But intrinsic motivation is when you, in and of yourself, are motivated internally for doing this because you love it, because you want to do it. Yeah, would you agree with that, Heather?
I think that's an absolute perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself, Angela. And of course, it's
easier to say than do.
Well, what we're about to get onto. The research shows that if you're an intrinsically motivated learner, you will go further and faster. I don't know if the research does show faster, actually, but if you're intrinsically motivated, you're more likely to stay the course on your learning. Because, and it makes sense when you think about it, because the motivation is coming from you from within, and you don't have to keep on finding that motivation from those external factors, whether it be a teacher or, you know, the exam result, like you said, or money motivation, or any of these things that are happening outside us. It comes from within. And Eric Booth kept on saying in his session, which I loved, that you have to find what turns you on.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying about how if you, like you said, the research shows that if you have a lower level skill or something small to do, that often just having a small reward for that works, but it stops working as it becomes more advanced or a skills-based thing for a long term, like learning an instrument. It just doesn't work in the long run. So the stickability definitely makes a difference, like you say, being turned on for the long run and the long learning process, sticking with it.
So if any of our listeners are out there, and this is going out in January, so you might be thinking about setting goals and what you want to achieve, and you might be reflecting on what happened in the last year. And we're not going to do those reflections with you today. But if you are thinking, oh, I've set a goal in the past and I struggled to reach that goal, or I lost my way and I felt like I wasn't sure how to keep going, or I lost motivation, then it might be worth, when you're doing those reflections, to think about, well, what was motivating me to do that? Why did I choose that goal? And, you know, what inside me made me want to do that? And if the answer is, well, I didn't choose that, I felt I should have chosen that, or it was expected. I know we're going to talk about these words. It was expected of me to do that. Then when you're setting your goals this year, you might want to think about what turns you on. So, what I want to talk about, though, with you, Angela, is even though we set this up for our students, for me, the session had a really profound impact. And ever since the session, I've been thinking, and I wouldn't say I've been confused, but I've been digesting and questioning and, wondering about what this means for me and where I go next. And yeah, it sort of got me a little bit tied. And so I thought it'd be interesting for us to discuss. So how do you feel from the session?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that you and I both share in common is that we love teaching and we love all the aspects of learning. And so that whole aspect of thinking how to be a better teacher and how to be a better student, a better learner, as really, something that's got me reflecting and thinking. I really got curious about the way that Eric Booth spoke about curiosity and thinking about what am I curious about? And I've kind of been taking that as a point. And in our membership, he presented for us, and I asked him in the membership, how do you decide which curiosity to explore if you have too many, which often is the case? And he said, well, think about the one that you're most curious about and start there. So I've been thinking about that aspect of like noticing curiosities and what am I curious about? And a big part of my teacher education degree was what we call discovery learning, thinking about what you want to discover and how when we're exploring something and wanting to find out more about it, we then find the tools along the way because we have that application. We're curious about that. So we go and find out all the different areas. So yeah, that's been a big area for me, trying to just think about noticing curiosity, thinking about what am I curious about myself and how do I spot those curiosities in my students, in other people. So being curious about others and their curiosities, but also being curious about my own. And it's not as straightforward an answer to find. So yeah, it's got me really reflective. I was saying to you just before we started recording, I feel like I need a month on a desert island just to like sit and think and reflect and consider these things to kind of take it all in.
Absolutely. Well, before I go down the road of kind of talking about my little brain knot that I've got going on personally around this whole topic, I want to share one of my biggest takeaways with everyone. And that is around, we kind of just mentioned it, around the language that we use for ourselves. And a few people said, I should do this, I should do that, etc., etc. And Eric was like, take should out your vocabulary. There's no should. Like, who said you should? What's this should? And when I was in the meeting, I thought, that's brilliant. I'm going to really hold on to that, and I'm going to take should out of my vocabulary. I'm not going to have it in there anymore. And I really liked that. I'm going to replace it with I'm excited to, or I'm looking forward to. I'm curious about. So I'm interested to hear your reflection on that, because that has then sent me down a little rabbit hole of confusion. But my initial reaction to that was, I like that, and I want to help the students remove should from their language, and I want to do it myself as well. But what's your reflections on that, Angela?
Yeah, I think that's so freeing to recognize that you don't have to do certain things, that we get to have that sense of autonomy, we get to choose. And I like to replace it with I get to do this, I get to do that. So that it's not seen as a chore or as work, even if it's something I want to do. As soon as I make it I should do this because I want to be better at the harp, it becomes a chore rather than a joy of learning the instruments and what I originally, was drawn to. So, or in any other aspect as well. So yeah, I think that aspect of tapping into the joy, tapping into the choice, tapping into not doing this for anyone else, but for myself. Because should implies that there's someone that's going to come and tell me off if I don't do it. But recognizing that I have the freedom. I have the freedom to explore and to discover and to see makes a big, big difference. And then the tasks that you choose to do no longer become tasks that you have to do. And there's a joy in that I'm doing them because I want to. I can enjoy that process rather than I just need to get this done so I can get onto the fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so true. And so I think that's a great takeaway for both of us. And like you say, quite freeing. And that was my initial kind of reflection, was like, this is really exciting and really freeing, and I want people to feel this in the membership. But the more I started thinking about it, the more I got myself in this kind of, I don't know, blurry line of like, if I think about what I really want, what turns me on, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but if anyone does, if anyone thinks about what they really, really want, like, I'm going to think really deeply in myself, what do I really want? And you set yourself a goal. There's a number of things that you have to do to get to that goal, right? So as soon as I then started thinking about it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to take away should. I'm going to be like, I choose to do this. I'm excited to do this. And I was thinking very much about that end goal. But once you've got that in place, there's a number of things that you have to do to reach that goal. And then I was like, well, there's the should coming back in. There's the have to coming back in. There's the expected to coming back in. And so I got myself in a little bit of a muddle about where is the line. I guess that we're talking about trying to give ourselves joy and freedom, and that's definitely what we want. But there has to be some form of discipline in there in order to get to that point. And I think that's really important. I think, in order to play that piece really beautifully, I do have to practice my exercises. But I'm excited to do that because I know that that's going to help me reach that goal. So I think it's still, for me, is changing that language of being excited to do those things which I should do. I'm doing little quoted quotes there. Just saying I'm excited to do these things because they're going to get me to that thing that's really, really exciting me. And do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, I think what really helps is now you're getting into a whole another area of discussion, which is the flow state. And I actually think that as soon as you're in a flow state, those should work tasks, if you like, you don't think about them. You don't think, oh, I need to do this because I need to get good at that. You're just working on it because you want to get to that end state, and you're just going for it and not realizing time's passing and this is actually work that you're doing. So discovering amongst yourself, what is it that you can do to tap into that flow state? And for those who don't know, the flow state is kind of that when you're so engrossed in something that you're so obsessing about and enjoying that the world's passing you by and you haven't even noticed, and you're just kind of pressing in with this hyper focus and joy, and it's kind of an ecstasy in the moment, and trying to find the ways that you can tap into that in your passions. Now, pursuing a passion, something that turns you on, is a way that can help doing that. But also, even in little things like the kind of exercises you're choosing to do. Maybe if you're someone that's creative, maybe it's in creating an exercise that exercises that point, and finding ways that you can creatively exercise that. If you're someone that really enjoys like troubleshooting and problem solving, maybe it's trying different methods on a piece of an excerpt and seeing, like, if I do this 5 times and then play it, will I be able to play it again tomorrow? Or if I do it backwards, will that make it more interesting? And so playing these kind of games, whatever gets you going, and that'll be completely different for different people on different days, but noticing whenever you get into that flow state and thinking about what got you there and getting into that more often means you can tap into that energy that doesn't feel like that grit and discipline and like I have to press through, which we all do have to do sometimes, but that makes it much more easier to make those decisions kind of subconsciously. They just happen with ease than kind of having to slog through because you feel like this is something I must do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so before I delve into the next thing that got my mind in a twist, which is quite a personal thing, I think, I know that for you, the discussion on mindset was quite important. So maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think this comes into what we were just saying about how, you might find what you're curious about, you might know what you want to do, but then believing you can do it. And, you might see a harpist playing in a concert and think, oh, I really want to play that piece in a concert someday. But then immediately all these thoughts come in of I can't. It's, another language thing, isn't it? Or I'll never be able to. And you start coming up with all the excuses and the limiting beliefs, maybe I'm too old or all these things. And some of them we've addressed in the podcast already. But I think that's really important, is to have that growth mindset, that it's not a case of limiting ourselves, taking hold of, if we have something that we want to pursue, that we don't immediately rule those things out. We start thinking about, there's a way, how am I going to do this? Not, I can't do this, or kind of, put it aside. So that can be a really, really big thing. And I think more often than not, that's where I see people tripping up. It's not so much that they don't know what they want to do. It's that they don't believe they can either get there, or even they don't believe they could do the work that they believe they need to do in order to get there. So it can be both kind of sides. They don't believe they have the innate ability, that this sort of talent idea of it, this sort of loose concept, or they believe that they could if they did all that work, but they don't believe they could do that work because of various excuses, time or age or injury or whatever it is. And while these things can be barriers, they're not necessarily barriers that can't be overcome with a bit of creativity and supports. And so that mindset, I think, is something that we all, especially as adults, I think sometimes the older we get, the more we have these kind of weird worlds ideas built into our minds, and we need to work through. I think working on our mindset sometimes can be an even bigger part of learning an instrument than learning the instrument itself, because we need to develop our motivation through believing we can do something, finding the tools to do it, finding how to get ourselves to do those things, and finding then that sense of meaning in doing that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic advice. And I think you're right. I think a lot of our audience will really connect with what you're saying. And I mean, I've lost track of how many times people have said to us, I can't. Even when they're like in the middle of working on something and they're saying I can't. And I'm like, you're doing it right now. You're working on it. So yeah, I guess I'm going to summarize a little bit of what you said for our first, or maybe our only big takeaway, because what I'm about to say I don't think is going to give anyone a big takeaway. But if you found what turns you on, just chase after it. You can. And in the end, like, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next week, but it will be at some point. And I think the other thing as well, just thinking about something that someone mentioned in the workshop, is that success will look different. Success in a goal, like, will look different to me, to different to Angela, to different to someone in the membership, to different to Eric Booth. And someone asked during the workshop, what if I've been working on something for months and months and months and I'm not getting any better? And the reflection on that was, are you really examining how you're measuring your success? And are you really examining if you're getting better or not? And what getting better looks like for you might be different to what your expectation, what should it look like? Maybe you've got that should word coming in and it might look different, and you have to examine how that's going to look, that success, and maybe even re-examine that as you go. But the point is that growth mindset. I mean, I don't believe that everyone's born with a little tub of talent and that's what they get. That's what you're given. And, you know, that's a fixed mindset. Everyone has, I don't actually think there's such a thing as talent. I think there's hard work, a little bit of natural ability, maybe in some areas. But in general, if you've got natural ability in one area, you're going to struggle in a different area, you know, and you're going to have to learn how to work in that. And so a growth mindset says that with hard work and patience and practice and application, you can grow and improve in any area. And I 100% believe that. And that's what research shows us. That's what we've been shown countless times. And so if you're out there and you've set a goal, you can do it. You might have to move the goalposts. You might have to change the shape of the goal just a little bit, but you can do it.
100%.
Yeah. In a way, like, I did want to talk about something else, but part of me is like, we should finish the podcast there. That was so good. But but I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I am going to.
Too much else to say.
You know, we could actually talk for hours on this subject, let's be frank. But
it's true.
I'm not going to let us. But what's really come away for me that I would really like to share, and this might come across confused because I've not sorted it out in my brain yet. And that's one of the reasons why I want to share it, really, is to kind of let people realise that sometimes it takes a while to process things in your brain and to think about what it means to you. But it's actually not a problem with mindset. So if you're out there thinking, yeah, I do believe that there's a growth mindset, and I don't think that I say I can't. My issue is actually before that step right now. Probably once I've got past this issue, I'll have the growth mindset issue. So it'll be coming in the future. But my issue right now is, what do I actually want? And really assessing that what I'm saying I want is intrinsic. It is me. And it's not what other people expect of me or I think I should be doing for other people. And yeah, I'm finding it really difficult to answer that question and to not say, oh yeah, I'm going to have this goal because I know it's really going to help everyone in the membership. Or I want to have this goal because I know that that'll make William really happy. Or, you know, And I'm finding it very difficult to make sure or to work out what it is that I want. It's sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, which I won't pull everyone down. And I hope I'm not having a midlife crisis. Eric Booth has caused me to have a midlife crisis. I'm not having a midlife crisis, am I, Angela?
I think this is just typical end of year, beginning of year. Like, what do I want to do with the next year of my life? If you are, then I've had one for the last 5 years. But yeah, I think it's a good point that you bring. That, what if we don't know what we're curious about or what we want to explore? I think a good starting point for that, and this is something I've also been kind of thinking about, trying to think of different areas, maybe not to the extent of a midlife crisis like you're thinking, but is about one of the things we have is we really encourage people to be inspired through going to concerts, getting to see exposure to lots of different harpists, lots of different experiences. We're not kind of learn from one teacher only and never ever play any other music but what that teacher's written. We really want to have lots and lots of experience, because sometimes you don't know what you want to explore. I was having a conversation recently with a harpist who had been playing harp, studied at conservatory level, and then went to a retreat and had a jazz harpist teach and said, oh, I really loved that. Now I want to explore jazz harp, and that's something I'm going to now make a major thing that I'm doing. And had he not had that exposure, would he have had that opportunity? So I think it's really important to expose yourself to different experiences, things not even necessarily in the same field, like concerts from other artists or conversations or try things new. And then when you're doing that, notice what sparks your interest. Notice what makes you feel that little fire come alive in you. And I often think that, I noticed that. I wonder if anyone else, if in my world, like you say, your husband or your harp friends or different people, if I was to tell them that this is actually what I want to explore with, they'll be surprised by that, because I don't think that's what they expect. And that can reveal to you maybe that that's not a should area, but it's actually something that's come directly from inside of you, not from externally. So yeah, looking for inspiration in different areas, and being exposed to a lot of things that can be a helpful way, but it does take time, and it does take thinking, and it does take soul searching.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I am going to do. So time and soul searching. So I'm looking forward to a trip away. Different culture, different music, different tastes, different senses. So it will be an explosion of inspiration, I think. But it will also be a time to relax and just stop and actually really take... Because I feel like I ask myself these questions, but then I'm like, I've got to be busy doing this, I've got to be busy doing that, and I've got to be busy doing the next thing. But actually taking some time to be like, I need to think about this. And I'm going to be away experiencing, I'm really excited. And taking time to take it in and actually say, what did I like about that? What did I not like about that? Like, is it sparking my curiosity? And taking the time to be able to ask that is what my plan is.
Yeah, so maybe that's another good takeaway for our listeners, is to recognize that even though it's January, when they're listening to this, we can fall into this trap of thinking, I need to have this whole year planned out, and I need to know what my goals are and what I'm doing, and I have to have, the whole plan of how I'm going to reach them done now because it's January and this is when we set that. But really taking the time to find that and to explore that, taking a few months or however long it takes to answer that, is absolutely fine. Take the time you need to discover what you want to do, not what you feel like you should do. And you can take that time. You get to take that time. It's one of the joys of being an adult. We get to make those decisions. Yeah.
Amazing. So I guess I did form a takeaway. You just had to prize it out of me. You're good at that, Angela.
It'll be fun to explore this in a year's time and see where we got to with all these thoughts at the beginning of the year.
Do you know that's what we should do next year? We should actually listen back to our podcasts and then comment on them. What do you think?
Do a reaction video.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose if people want to see that, they can let us know.
True. Well, that seems like a perfect place to leave it. We both had pretty awesome takeaways there. And I guess we both need to say thank you to Dr. Eric Booth.
Yeah, hugely inspirational. If you get a chance to listen to him, do. If you get a chance to read his books, do. And you might just find yourself contemplating and growing too.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Angela. So lovely to chat to you.
Lovely to chat to you too, Heather. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Angela for this chat. These conversations always leave me thinking. And I hope this one helps you to reflect on what genuinely motivates you and what you want to pursue this year as a harp learner. Now, next week we're back with another one of our regular features, a chat with a learner harpist. We will be joined by June Epp from Pittsburgh in the USA, who has been playing harp since 2021. June is a lovely active member of the How to Harp membership, and you will often spot her in our practice performing club accompanied by her beautiful birds, which always gives her harp playing, I think, that extra little shine. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do like, comment, subscribe and share with a harp friend. It does help us to grow and helps us to reach lots of harpists around the world. And I'll see you next week.